power supply is always an integral part of your finished product. You can go on Alibaba and you find plenty of wall plug and power supply makers, but whom can you trust that supply you with legitimate certification reports that are still available maybe 4 or 5 years later when you need it? That's not so easy. Hello, I'm Florian Heike, an electronics engineer who lived 24 years in Taiwan and have been active in the power electronics development for 30 years.
Okay, so Florian, you're also the CEO, General Manager of Celinius. We're going to talk about power electronics.
Yes.
So a couple of things I want to learn first. What is your background in power electronics? And what are power electronics?
Yeah, I have a degree in electronics engineering and systems and control. And actually, I have been working inside a power electronics company already when I was 16. And we have been supporting developers of power electronic circuits by advising them on components and sourcing components for their circuits, as well as distributing power electronics for special lighting all the way since the very early beginning of Celinius. So our team, we're a company of 10 people, are distributing lamp drivers for discharge lamps. And discharge lamps for special applications. Discharge lamps is actually where the lamp consists of a glass body with 2 electrodes where you ignite a plasma, and this plasma is creating a very high light density light source.
Okay, and so for power electronics and lighting, these are kind of complementary.
Yes, they are, because any light source, even an LED light source, is usually not ready to be connected directly to a commonly available power source like your power plug at home. You always need to convert the power that you get out of your electrical grid to a form, usually waveform or a current voltage ratio, which is suitable for the light source. Yes, and the power electronics is this part in the middle that converts it from the one that you have to the one that you need.
Okay, and so can you outline the process involved in sourcing power electronics from, let's say, Europe to anywhere?
Well, it depends. We are offering the support on different levels. So the power electronics range is a huge range. It's one of these things that you use every day and you don't realize they are. There are, I bet you have at least 30 or 40 power supplies in your home. In your car, you have more. Every PC has it. Every laptop has it. There's always power electronics inside. So we are not covering the whole world, or this is impossible to do. But we are serving companies that are usually doing something special in their range to serve a specific need. And we sometimes source entire power supplies, like even wall plugs that you can plug directly into your wall, but also sometimes only components, because inside the power electronics you have switching components, you have inductors, transformers, capacitors, PCBs, connectors. So sometimes our customers only need specific parts and they assemble them in their market. That depends on how they are set up.
Okay, so let's just say you're an entrepreneur in Germany or in France and you're looking to source power supply.
Yeah.
Now, what are the challenges involved?
Well, again, just like in the consumer electronics, most of today's power supplies are manufactured in China nowadays. Mm-hmm. It's just the way it is. And usually there are also very good power supplies ready. However, the power supply is always an integral part of your finished product. So when it comes to certifying your product ready for launch and you have a power supply inside, you have an interaction between the power supply and your product. And you would need to verify that your system, your product, with that power supply is compliant to the requirements. Mm-hmm. So depending on what market you're serving, you sometimes can just pick up an off-the-shelf power supply, which you can buy from a distributor, and in certain circumstances, that's fine. But often it's not. And that's the time when we become involved. Because you can go on Alibaba and you find plenty of wall plug and power supply makers, but whom can you trust that supply you with legitimate certification reports that are still available maybe 4 or 5 years later when you need it? That's not so easy.
Mm-hmm.
So usually we separate the market into 2 different sections. One is where you have a product where the power supply is embedded inside your product. So if you have an enclosure, could be a lamp, could be a measurement device, could be a machine, and the product is built inside. There, in particular, you need to verify the interaction with your device. The second one are where the power supply is outside. So you see today many laptops, they have outside power supplies. You see some wall plug power supplies where the power supply is directly connected to the plug. Those ones tend to be more off-the-shelf products.
Mm-hmm.
But even there, when somebody has a need, we have reliable sources who can offer the products with the necessary engineering level to do it. Because the power supply is such a boring product, but if the power supply fails, your product is literally dead.
Yeah.
So it is unfortunately something you have to pay attention to whenever you design a product and you don't want to have an unhappy customer.
Yeah, and I think for these boring products, it's not sexy to think about it or design them, but it's so important. Do you find that some of your clients tend to overlook the complexity of the power supply sourcing?
Yes, but usually they come after they suffered.
Okay, so they encountered a problem and they call you back. And
Yeah, it's as I say, if you're only price driven, you'll probably pay the price sooner or later.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the power supply you can save money on the components, but then sacrifice the lifetime. And then the second challenge is that, especially for the switching components and semiconductors inside, there is a lot of counterfeit or recycled products, especially in South China, penetrating into the market. So even you try to buy genuine semiconductors, you may still be fooled around. And once you have like a 1 or 2% problem in your product, and you don't know where it's coming from,
that's a recall.
That could become, depending on where it is being used, if it's in a safety relevant application, could become a very expensive dilemma.
Right.
So that means there you have to pay particular attention. So it's not good enough just to buy a power supply with a certain spec and say, oh yeah, I get that spec. And then maybe you buy 10,000 power supplies and 9,980s work fine.
Mm-hmm.
But the 20 pieces fail after 1 month and there's a smoke coming out of the power supply. Yeah. That's not cool. And if this is happening, let's say, in a surgery room with medical equipment, then this is even less cool.
Wow. Can't imagine that situation.
Well, yeah. So these are so you have to look at where you're using it. And so, again, as explained on previous episode, we are more focusing on the professional market, where people have to deliver a certain credibility to their product, and the power supply tends to be an integral part of it.
Now, you're here in Asia, you're here in Taiwan. I know you're in the factories, you're on the ground. What are you doing here to ensure that these power supplies are not going to have these problems?
Well, first of all, we're having a network of suppliers that we already work with, where we have experiences. And when you talk to these factories and you address specific problems, especially like on the semiconductor sourcing, but also on the reliability testing, you can get an impression on how solid they are with their engineering. I have to say, you do have very capable suppliers in Asia. But the really, really, really capable and really, really competitive ones, they won't talk to you. Because you're too small.
Oh.
So meaning when you look at those, one famous Taiwanese company is Delta Electronics, one of the public companies here in Taiwan, Taiwan. They are making a lot of these black power blocks for the notebook power supplies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but they're not interested to any order that is at least a 6-digit figure.
Right.
And that usually doesn't meet the demand.
So the challenge is that you're looking for those smaller suppliers who are then willing to work on smaller MOQs.
Yeah, it's like a balance. Yeah, you cannot do very small power. So I think anything under 500 or 1,000 is really difficult to do. I have to say, it's really, people even will not be able to touch it. But I cannot offer usually the quantities that like big consumer brands will take. But there are companies in the middle that still employ a decent engineering and that have the skill and experience and also the networks to do it. And now you need to understand, especially when your power supply becomes a little bit special, how you make sure that your critical parameters are considered and taken care of in the production line. So and that's why when we have such a project, we do send our project managers on the ground and make an on-site investigation that we are not being fooled around.
Okay. And so there's an inherent challenge on their side, the supplier side, to meet certain levels of quality at smaller MOQs. I mean, naturally, there's a huge market for people who are not PC companies. But do you think that there's just a challenge on their side, or is it more like they're kind of playing dirty games?
I don't say necessarily dirty games, but the set situation, what you're facing is that it's a very competitive field. So for the manufacturer to still make a reasonable margin, there is a certain exposure to risks in purchasing.
Right.
Especially on the semiconductor side, and to cut the corners. Maybe they're even being fooled around by other people from outside. It doesn't even have to be inside their own organization. But the other challenge is that you are relying on certain IC technologies which neither of these suppliers can control. So nowadays you have power control ICs where you can only find data sheets in Chinese.
Wow. Yeah.
A Western engineer wouldn't even consider this. And then you ask, why is that? Why don't they sell the ICs elsewhere? Well, because there's so little market for that.
What is IC?
Integrated circuit.
Okay.
Like these little black ones with the little legs that you place on the PCBs.
Right.
The ones that Taiwan is famous for.
So even the power supply suppliers have to source their own components.
Yes.
And then they may not be sure if they are getting fooled around.
Correct.
Wow. So there's different levels of of sourcing.
And it's a very cash intensive business. So it's almost like you buy gold or copper. Nobody gives you a credit line. So you can't buy on term.
Right.
It's like cash against delivery for many of those components.
Yeah. So you couldn't even test them. You need to put up the cash first before you know if it's quality or not.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So how do you mitigate all of these risks for your clients?
Again, we're trying to use as much common and proven technology that's already there. So for instance, for a power supply circuit, you have some standard voltages, which are very common, 3.3 volt, 5 volt, 12 volt, 24 volts. But then we have companies that need a different voltage, but the ICs they use is still the same. It's just a different configuration. So we try again to use as much proven technology as possible, and then at the end of the production line, we insist on batch-based quality testing. So meaning if you have a 1000 batch, you let every power supply run for a few hours, but a certain subset of it you let run for longer. And you want to make sure that this subset is verified before the lot hits your customer.
Oh, okay.
Because if there is a systematic issue, maybe even from subcontractor, you want to detect it. Although it's always better to produce good quality in the first place. So, but for the IC, it's difficult to put in to look inside.
Do your clients need to put any major investment before the testing starts?
Yeah, of course. I mean, for the power supplies, normally it's all about you have to put a down payment down.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, because otherwise your supplier will not even bother to buy the components.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.